So obviously in James, we're talking about making changes. So growing. And all of these, I'm challenged by all of them. I'm challenged by what we're going to talk about today. And you will be too, I think. So, something I've noticed about James, just in studying, is that, have y'all noticed that James is used a lot by offshoots of Christianity? People that want to prove. You may not have noticed this, but a lot of cults and stuff use James. They'll go to James. But one reason is that when you take James verses out of context with James, when you study James, everything has to be within context. Now, Romans is a little bit different. You can take one verse and it's like, bam, it just tells a whole story. James is different. And I'll give maybe a better explanation when I understand it better. But it's like you have to take chunks to understand what he's saying. And so today, when we start off, you'll have to stay with me the whole time to get the the point he's making. Does that make sense? It's he speaks in these chunks. He's just his style of writing, I guess. And so you have to be very careful with James not to take things out of context, because you could take one verse out of James and you can prove that salvation is by works. We'll get into that next week. You can, I'll say prove it, but you're wrong because you're taking it out of context. So it's important. It's not just that part of James, it's the whole book of James that we have to be careful about that with. But what we're talking about are making real, practical, honest to goodness, functional changes in how we live. Are y'all picking that up? We need to grow. And so in the way that God works, this is what I read in the Bible, this is what I've observed. And the way that God works is that He brings to us, we talked about this before, He'll bring to this group what you need to grow in, but it's what I need to grow into. But He'll bring it to us. It's vitally important that you don't just sit here and say, oh yeah, that was good, that was cool, thank you. That's not how you grow. You have to digest it. You have to take it in. It has to sink into your heart. And then the changes will show up in your life. So it's vital that when we talk about something here and it strikes you just a little bit, that's not me. That's not because I studied hard. It's or because I didn't study enough. It's because that's the Holy Spirit. It's how He works. And so He wants you to make changes in your life to become more like Christ, to impact the world for Jesus. And that's not going to happen unless you continue growing. And James is really cool because it's so down to earth. It's so but when we get through today, you'll say, I need to grow in this. This is what I need to grow in. This is what I need to change. This is how my attitude and my actions need to change. So you'll get that today. But it'll take hanging with us through the whole thing to get it. But it's just how God works. And so you remember last week we were talking about bearing fruit. We were talking about not having favoritism. And if you listened and if you kind of could wake up to the fact of how different ways that it may not be that you're like you have a junior high school attitude and you're in a clique and nobody else gets in and only these people. It may not be as obvious as that, but it still can be there in your life. And it limits you in growth, and it limits you in how God can use you. And so we'll touch on that some today, but if you didn't get that and you didn't change, you need to go back and get it, because it's just how God works. You need to get it and then move on to the next thing and hang on to that. So we need to be growing in these things. And y'all remember I shared with you not that long ago about the prayer of Jabez, and how Jabez asked God to increase his territory. And I'll go into some more detail later, but I've been praying that God would increase my territory. Now, we've been wanting that lot that's next to us. It took y'all a minute, didn't it? I like that delayed reaction. So it doesn't mean that I want to be a megachurch pastor or something like that. It means I want to increase my influence and my impact on people's lives, including you guys. But other people, I want to increase my territory, my spiritual territory. And you should want the same thing. You should, in a sense, we'll go over that later at some point. It's what I'm praying for. I want us all to be praying along that line. And God answers that prayer. And it also has to do with trials that we studied the first part of James. How do we assimilate trials and how do we use those to increase our territory? But we'll get into that later. Last week it was a wrong focus. How we can get a wrong focus and get distracted from what God has for us. It's a wrong focus. Last week the wrong focus was a wrong focus on people. It could be an individual. And almost everybody, you may not nod your head, you may not admit it, but there's probably at some point you've had a wrong focus on an individual. That's not just male-female thing. It does include that, but it's not just that. It's how we can get a wrong focus on people and show favoritism in a way towards them or even a group of people. And so we'll touch on that again today, how we can be alert to that. Now it's not wrong to have an inner circle. We talked about that, where you have people that are, it's not exclusive though, it's inclusive, in that the people that your inner circle should be people of gospel partners, where you are actively reaching out. You're kind of back to back. You're facing out, looking for opportunities to work together to share the gospel, to bring people in, not exclude, not get inwardly focused. Inwardly focused happens to families, it happens to churches, it happens among friends, it happens. It's a part of our flesh. We have a tendency to do that. And so this is some warnings about that, and James calls it here favoritism. There's a lot of different names you could call it. And he uses the example of the rich man coming into but it's just an example. It's just one thing that maybe one church he knew about struggled with that, and so he used that for an example. That may not be something we even struggle with, but we do struggle with the thing of favoritism. We do struggle with that, and we need to be alert to it and learn how to put boundaries if we're doing that, how to have boundaries in our relationships. And so today is still about relationships. Remember, anytime we talk about relationships, you guys, your spiritual ears should perk up, because relationships are important to God. We talk about this all the time. Maybe it's because I always knew it, but it's like for some reason the light's just turned on for me about how relational that God is. He's not needy, but He is relational. And so He wants us to also, in our own way, we're not all relational in the same way. Some people are super outgoing, some people more introverts, but no matter what your personality type, God intends to use that type to be relational in the right kind of way. So He's not asking you to do something you're not built for. You are built for it, and He has a way for you to express relationship that may be different than somebody else's. But He does have a way for you to express it. And this common ingredient He's going to give us today, though, is for all of us, every single one of us, in our relationships, of an area that we need to grow in if we're going to continue to have impact. Because if we do not grow in this area, it will stop us dead in our tracks of our effectiveness for God. So it's a critical area that we're going to deal with today. Okay, so let's read this, and we're going to read this chunk. And remember, I would like to, sometimes we'd like to go verse by verse, but it's really tough because the way James is going to do here, he's going to start off here. We're going to read verse 8 as we start with, but when we get down to verse 13, if you're aware, you're going to realize that verse 13 greatly impacts verse 8. It's just how James writes, okay? So we're going to adapt to James or how he's doing things. We can't just teach every single book exactly the same way. So let's read that. Jesse, what do you think? You want to go with it there? That whole section there, 8 through 13. Everybody follow along. It's chapter 2 of James. This is what we're going to deal with today. Bailey, as usual, you're back in swing of things here. You nailed the verse we're going to use today from Jude. We're going to the very verse, how you picked up that verse, and it's about one of the few references we're going to have today. But so that's cool. Anyway, go ahead.
If you really keep the royal law found in Scripture, love your neighbor as yourself, you are doing right. But if you show favoritism, you sin and are convicted by the law as lawbreakers. For whoever keeps the whole law and yet stumbles at just one point is guilty of breaking all of it. For he who said, "You shall not commit adultery," also said, "You shall not murder." If you do not commit adultery, but do commit murder, you have become a lawbreaker. Speak and act as those who are going to be judged by the law that gives freedom, because judgment without mercy will be shown to anyone who has not been merciful. Mercy triumphs over judgment.
Well, that is like kind of confusing in a way to read through that whole thing, just in the way James does things. But this is in the context. It's in the context of identifying and condemning partiality, favoritism, whatever word you want to use. So what we're looking at today is in the context of condemning partiality. James admonishes us to show love to others, but he's going to focus on one specific way. So we have one point to make today, really. I'm not going to tell what it is yet, but we have one point to make. And this is the way he's going to focus on how we are to be showing love to one another and also love to the world. So, and love even to family members. It's a very general concept. And he's going to illustrate the importance of this topic with kind of the proverbial chain. You know what I mean? It's like, so James uses the law because he's talking to Jewish people. The whole church was Jewish at this time. And so when he talks about the law so much, he's not legalistic and he's not saved by works, and a lot of people interpret him like that. But he just uses the law to make his points because the people he's talking to, the law is important to them and they're so familiar with the law, the people will interpret it exactly opposite of what he means. And so he's going to say, it's like there's a chain, and it's like the 10 Commandments are on that chain. So link after link after link. And so what James is going to say, though, you guys they know what he's talking about, but somebody else reading this may not get it. If you can break one link in the chain, and the whole thing comes tumbling down, right? So do you see what point he's getting at there? You break one law, you're like breaking all the laws. That's the point he's making. It really goes back to you. We can't do it. So, but he's making an illustration here. You break one law, you break them all, and this law is just as important as any others. You guys don't think it is important, but this law of loving your neighbor as yourself and doing it in this specific way is just as important as the law that says do not murder, do not commit adultery. It's just as important as those. And so that's just this illustration. Is that this showing love in this way he's going to talk about is as important a link as any of the links. It is key. Here's what you're going to find. What we're going to talk about today is about relationships to one another, but how that greatly impacts God's relationship with you, even God's attitude towards you, even how God treats you is going to be impacted by how, if you respond rightly to this way of treating others. So it's really a deep, important concept thing to get a hold of, because within his explanation, there's a necessary reminder within his explanation that the law does not save us, but the law shows us our sin. That's his message. He's not saying the law saves us. The law is used and it's productive, it's active, but we can't be saved by the law. But the law does reveal to us our sin and reveals to us that we need mercy from God. That's key to understand where he's going here. And as I studied through this was a stark reminder to me that I need to move forward, that I need to grow. I need to grow in this, all the things we've been talking about. But I need to grow in this. And my next step, I need to grow in what he's talking about today in this. I need to grow and therefore increase my impact to the world around me by becoming more Christ-like. If you grow in this today, what we talk about today, you will become more Christ-like. Yeah, if you grow in anything we talk about, yeah, but there's a very specific attribute. If we grow in this attribute in the right way, we will become more like Jesus. And God will increase our territory when we become more like Jesus. So that is what we want to get through. That's what we want to get through today. And so we're going to read Bailey's verse now. Blake, if you'll take that, Jude, is verses 22 and 23.
Be merciful to those who doubt. Save others by snatching them from the fire. Save others by snatching them from the fire. To others show mercy, mixed with fear, hating even the clothing stained by corrupted flesh.
Now, there's a lot of points we can make in there with that verse. The point we're going to grab onto is showing mercy mixed with fear. So, do you realize that Jude, who wrote that, is James's brother? And that they say some similar things if you read closely. It's kind of cool the way they're kind of alike, the way brothers would be. And he's saying here, this, we don't want to get, we're using that verse, we don't want to get sidetracked when we talk about mercy. Because a lot of times when we talk about mercy, we forget that mercy does not ignore sin. Okay, you'll understand that more deeply as we go along. In fact, if sin is ignored, it's not real mercy. It's not mercy, because mercy takes into account sin, or it's not mercy. So, and as we move through this, we will see that to show mercy does not mean that we overlook, we soft pedal, we lighten sin. It doesn't mean that at all. If we're merciful people, doesn't mean that we overlook sin. So, what James is dealing with here goes to the heart of how God desires us to treat others, think about others, our attitude toward others. It greatly impacts, though, our relationship with God. I want you to don't leave that behind as we go through this. So, and this is not saying, there's a lot of qualifiers here. It's not saying that as we talk about showing mercy to everyone, as we talk about showing love to everyone, it doesn't mean that we discard discernment, that we need to know where to invest our time and energy. So, when someone's hungry for the gospel, we know that we need to go and invest. But that doesn't mean that we don't share the gospel with everyone. It's just that where do we spend the most time? It's not to the person that's most resistant. It's the person that is leaning towards the gospel. That's where we go. And it's not about a personal preference or favoritism that we show mercy. That's an important concept as we get through this. But let's go back and read verse 13. Because remember, I said that impacts the way that this is the way that James thinks. Its impact. So, are you with us?
Yep. James 2:13.
Yep.
Okay. Because judgment without mercy will be shown to anyone who has not been merciful. Mercy triumphs over judgment.
Whoa, that's a scary and powerful verse. What did that say? Anybody in your own words? Just what did that say?
Mama.
I don't know.
Okay, Bay doesn't know. Does anyone know?
I'm not good at trying to do that.
Actually, read it one more time.
Mercy triumphs over judgment.
What was the first part?
Because judgment without mercy will be shown to anyone who is not been merciful.
I'm tired.
What is?
If you don't show mercy to others, you won't be.
Okay, that's what it says. That's what it says. Now, be careful with James. Obviously, that's not talking about salvation, is it? No. If you were confused and you were just reading that verse by saying, "Oh my goodness, God, I can't be saved unless I show mercy to people." No, Has nothing to do with you being saved, about you showing mercy to other people. But it does impact how God deals with you. Okay? So when does that happen? When does that happen? Well, it can happen. It doesn't say. It could be happening at the Bema. Because you are going to stand before Christ. You actually, by yourself, will stand before Jesus accountable to the life you have lived. This is not talking about the great white throne judgment. You won't be there. That's for non-believers who will be sentenced at that time. You will be at the Bema to receive your reward. You receiving your reward, your eternal reward, and how Jesus handles you will be impacted how you have shown mercy in your life. Okay? It also could be talking about this, your very life right now. Is that how does God deal with you when you sin? You realize when you sin, you don't pay the price for your sin. It's already paid for, right? We know that. Jesus already paid for that. But there are consequences to sin, aren't there? You sin, and you know, I'm forgiven, but you know what? I said that to that person, or I did that, or I thought that, and I know there's going to be some fallout from it. Y'all aware of that? That happens? You have fallout and consequence for sin. What if God just... Have you ever noticed that sometimes the fallout doesn't come? You had it coming to you, it was going to come, but it doesn't come. God doesn't give you the full consequences that were just a natural outcome of your sin. God had mercy on you. God had mercy on you. Do you realize God... you correct me if I'm wrong, but God deals with us according to His mercy, according to how we have shown mercy. You know what? You're going to get a deep lesson here about my mercy because you haven't shown mercy to your wife. You haven't shown mercy to your husband. You haven't shown mercy to your friends. You haven't shown mercy to the church. You haven't shown mercy to that person that's lost. And you need to learn what it's like to not have mercy. You're going to get the full, not the payment of that sin. That's already paid for. But the full consequence of that sin without mercy. I'm telling you, God deals with us. You're not an independent operator. God deals with you. You are a child of God. As a parent, a good parent deals with a child, God deals with us. He blesses us. He gives us consequences. He gives us trials. He blesses us. He gives us mercy. He withholds His mercy. God does all those things with us. So that's a pretty crazy thought, isn't it? It affects how God interacts with us. Our mercy that we show one another. So a story is told of a young soldier in Napoleon's army. Young guy, new guy, and he betrayed Napoleon somehow. I don't know how serious. I don't know exactly what happened. He betrayed him somehow, and so the punishment for betraying Napoleon, the France, the army, the mission was death. Right? That was the punishment. So here's this young soldier, and then Napoleon just they're back in town or whatever. He's like, "You have been treacherous. You have not been faithful. You have betrayed. You ran away from battle. The punishment is death." And his mom throws herself at Napoleon's feet. Have mercy on my son. Have mercy on him. And Napoleon says, "Look, he did this. He betrayed us. If the punishment is death, he did it, and he deserves death." And his mom says, "I know he did it. That's why I'm asking for mercy. I know he did it. I'm asking you for mercy." It's like, whoa. She understands mercy. You see mercy without knowing the sin, without knowing the offense. How do you really understand mercy? You have to acknowledge there was sin there. There was wrong done. But she's asking for mercy, favor. It is mercy. It's the characteristic of mercy that that motivates God's grace, that motivates His salvation of us. It's His mercy, recognizing the sin, but offering mercy instead of judgment. Mercy triumphs judgment. It gets back to the character of God to really understand what's going on. So, This is not about making excuses for another person and their sin against you. So I'm not talking about, it could be minor, it could be major, okay? But it's not about making excuses for another person like we intend to do, especially when we involve favoritism. And it's not even about asking for an apology. It's not even asking somebody for an apology because they wronged you. It's about showing mercy. It's not about them, it's about you. It's about showing mercy. You have been wronged in some way. A slight way, a big way, whatever. But it's you showing mercy. There may not even be a discussion. But it's about you showing mercy. Jesus told a parable about this in Matthew. Lori, if you'll just look at Matthew 18. We're just going to read the last verse of the parable. You know the story. It's the rich landowner or whatever, and there were many debts to him, and this one servant had a great bags of gold, I guess. It was like the debt was tremendous, something he could never pay. And the rich landowner it says he had mercy on the servant, and he forgave the entire debt. He had mercy on him. But that servant then went to a friend. And that friend owed him some minor amount. And he started choking the guy out. And he's going to throw him in prison until he pays his full debt. And the original landowners looked at that situation and said, whoa, wait a minute here. Will you read verse 35?
This is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother or sister from your heart.
So, do you see how it gets back to God treating you? God is aware of how you treat other people. He's aware of your attitude toward other people. He's aware of your favoritism. He's aware of your lack of mercy. He's aware of your critical spirit towards other people. Listen, your critical spirit is a lack of mercy. Your attitude toward others. The point James is making, though, is not focused on God's mercy, but it's on the mercy that we show others. It's not about the mercy we have received, but more the mercy we are to show one another. And it's not mercy just shown to a certain few, okay? It's a character trait of ours, that we become more like Jesus and we show mercy. But you say, but they didn't treat me right. They weren't fair to me. They gossiped about me. They talked about my family. They wronged me. They ignored me. And God's going, yeah? Yeah? All that is a part of mercy. You do not have mercy without the wrong. You've been done wrong. Will you show mercy? Or will you exact a payment from them because you have been wrong? Will you then ignore them? They've ignored you. Will you then turn your back on them? They've turned their back on you. Now I'm not saying you have to keep. Don't misinterpret. I'm not saying that you have to continue pursuing somebody that's turned their back on you. I'm just saying your attitude, your heart, is full of mercy towards that person. We all need mercy. Do you need mercy? Do you need mercy? I'm not talking about from God. I'm talking about your relationships. Do you need mercy, or do you treat everyone perfectly? Always kind, always generous, always with love? Or do you make errors in your relationships and you need mercy? Is anybody here that doesn't need mercy? Goodbye. You don't need me. I don't need you. Do you need mercy? But do you freely give mercy? It's said of God that He is rich in mercy, and therefore He provides salvation. That's grace. Let's look at Ephesians 2:4. Julie.
But because of His great love for us, God, who is rich in mercy.
Then it goes on to talk about salvation, where he offered salvation.
Oh, do you want? It's just too forward.
You can,
You want me to keep? Okay.
you can.
Who is rich in his mercy, made us alive with Christ, and even when we were dead in transgressions, it is by grace you have been saved.
See, everybody talks about that, and that's true. That is so true. By grace you have been saved. What motivated that grace? God had mercy on you. He saw your sin, or it wouldn't be mercy. He saw your sin. He had mercy on you. He didn't have some great discussion with you about his mercy. But he, without your involvement, he had mercy on you without your involvement. He offered you salvation. Now your involvement becomes necessary. You need to receive that grace to be saved. But you had nothing to do with his mercy. All you did was sin. You see, all you did was sin. But he, because of who he is, because he's rich in mercy, because of his mercy, he offered you grace. And therefore you were saved. And you received the abundance of God's mercy, the benefit of his riches and mercy. And he showed you grace, and you received his grace, and you were forgiven, and your relationship with God was restored. Because of, it started off with his mercy and his love for you. So mercy also conveys compassion. It's God's mercy, again, that compels him to forgive and to give grace. So for us to consistently offer mercy, Caleb, to offer mercy to those around us is very Christ-like. You see how that's very Christ-like? To offer mercy. Because that is what God has done to you. He has offered you mercy. Yeah. So, like the fruit of the Spirit, we are called. Like any fruit of the Spirit, are you to offer your love, your patience, your kindness in a prejudiced fashion? Towards just a certain individuals? Towards your group, towards your crew, towards your family? Are you to offer mercy towards all without favoritism or prejudice? You know what? The Bible doesn't use the word that much prejudice. That kind of. But I believe that God has a hatred for that sin of prejudice, like whether that's racism or whatever it is, because of the favoritism that is behind it. And God detests that because there is because it reveals your lack of mercy. Because your mercy to your favorites is not mercy. It's favoritism. You confuse mercy with favoritism. If you interpret your mercy towards those that you approve of, you interpret that's not mercy that you have towards them. It's favoritism. It originates in the flesh, not from the Spirit. Do you see the difference? You could mix the two up, favoritism and mercy. Now, again, mercy involves seeing the fault. Are you going to respond to the fault with criticism, judgment? What do you say in that last verse? Mercy trumps judgment. Mercy triumphs over judgment. It's stronger than judgment. God's mercy is stronger than judgment. Your mercy even is stronger than judgment. And sometimes it is even needed for those that are closest to us. I think divorce may be more about a lack of mercy than it is a lack of forgiveness. Or a thing of disagreement or whatever reason that people get divorced. I think it stems probably from a lack of mercy. Because if you want to maintain a close and intimate relationship with another person, it requires mercy. Or you will not have any close and intimate relationships because you will be too critical and too judgmental. Even if you never say a word, it's your heart that's what's looking at here. But mercy overcomes that critical spirit, and we offer mercy Even because in relationships you're going to be wrong. That's just going to tell you a little secret, okay? If you haven't had many relationships and you're new to this thing of relationships, you are going to be wronged. You're going to be talked bad about. You're going to be mistreated. I'm not saying that you enable people. Okay, you know what I mean by that. I'm not saying that guy that mistreats the girl and she just continues to take it, or vice versa. That's not what I'm talking about. Okay, don't get the two confused. But mercy does recognize real wrong and offers mercy to that person. And maybe you need to be out of the presence of that person. It may very well mean that, but you still can offer mercy. You still can offer mercy. It may be the best thing for that person for you to be out there. But you can still, your heart is mercy, and your heart is ready for reconciliation. So, a lack of mercy, even in friendships, even in cliques, or in body, in a church, or in families, a lack of mercy eventually causes division, because there will always be offenses. Right? There will always be offenses, and if there's no mercy, if you do not have mercy, there will eventually be division because of the lack of mercy. Of course, this ties back to the context of favoritism, because that's the context that James is writing here. And we may offer mercy to those we favor, but only up to a certain point, because the source of favoritism is the flesh. And we end up hating those we formerly had favoritism towards. Have you not seen that? That person that you have favoritism towards, that's that flesh appeal, you end up hating that person. Because it's not mercy. It's favoritism. Mercy can deal with the faults. Favoritism cannot. This is one of the reasons that when people show favoritism towards me, after my years of experience in relationships, when people show favoritism towards me, that I don't see them show towards others, then I dread what will eventually come. What will eventually come will be bitterness. Because this comes out of their flesh. And that's their appeal. If I'm talking about myself, it's their appeal to me, is their flesh. And it will eventually become bitterness, because it was not mercy, it was favoritism, which comes from the flesh. This does not mean that you cannot have special affection for someone. I'm not talking about just romantic relationships. You can't have, that doesn't mean you can't have special affection for someone, appreciate their good character, etc. But you need to take care of that. You need to be careful with it. There can even be a God-given mercy, particular mercy, for a certain group of people. You could have, I know this is getting recorded, but I'm going to say it anyway. But you could have, and I hope you do, great mercy towards the community of LDS that we live along. That should be what you have. Is great mercy. You see the falsehood, you see the wrong. That doesn't make you go crazy with criticism and pushing them away. It should. Your mercy should offer to them truth. That should be the result of your mercy towards them. This is a crazy little example, if I'm talking about that same topic. Is that you ever notice that you have some LDS friends that you refuse to share the gospel with because you so like them so much and you don't want to offend them? Because you know the gospel will offend them and it'll probably mess up your friendship. So you don't share the gospel with them? That, my friend, is favoritism. Mercy will see the fault and share the truth. Do you have those friends that you cannot ever call sin on them? Because you like them so much and you don't want to mess up the relationship. And you know how they are. If you call them on their sin, they're going to get mad at you. That is favoritism. You need to learn how to identify it in yourself. If you're refusing to hold your friend accountable in some way that God has revealed to you, then you do not have proper boundaries with that person. And you need to offer, if God has instructed you and dealt with you and you see it, to be able to offer, to be able to give that, even if it causes discord. Do y'all see that connection with mercy and sin? It's like, but at the same time, our attitude towards them is favor. Because that is where God ends up with His mercy, is He offers us favor, which is grace. He offers us grace, favor, out of His mercy. That should be how we treat others. Out of our mercy, we treat them. And out of our mercy, we offer them either truth or the gospel or whatever it is. Mercy, as I said, conveys compassion. We are to be like Jesus in this. You know that it says that Jesus had compassion. He had mercy on the sheep that were without a shepherd. And in that sense, in the Greek, we don't get that out of but in that Greek, the way that compassion is used, it's like it has to do with your guts, like a gut punch. It's like, have you ever had such compassion for someone? It's like, oh man, I feel for them. Oh God, right here. That's how Jesus felt towards you when He offered you grace. You see, when we are spirit controlled, we don't have that in our flesh. When we are spirit controlled, we can have mercy as a result, because we're dead to self, alive to Christ. We can have mercy for someone we may not even normally be attracted to. But we can have, oh man, I just want to help them. I want to share the gospel with them. I want to show them love. I want to give to them to help meet their need because of the mercy that is from Jesus. And it's not dealt out by favoritism. So if you have only a few people that you can treat like that, you, my friend, have an issue with favoritism, and you need to grow in mercy. Because mercy is shown to all, because it's a part of who you are, your character. And that is what we need to grow in if we're going to be a body that we're called to be, because we're going to see things from one another. We're going to be treated sometimes. You could have something against me right now. That I've said something, I've done something, whatever. It could be real or perceived. But you need to offer me mercy. Even if we haven't discussed it. You need to offer me mercy. And have that right attitude. And it's the same for me towards you and towards one another. And it comes from God. And God loves it, appreciates it, values it. When we show that to one another, to the world. Do you see how God values that? Because it is primary to who He is. And if you're missing out on that trait in your life, you're missing out on being Christ-like. You need to learn how to let mercy triumph over your judgment and criticism of others. Let mercy triumph, not judgment. Goodbye. Oh, fast little feet and the door opens. So, notice that when Jesus had compassion and mercy on the crowds, and He went down among them, and He met their needs, and He healed them, and then what did He say? Go and practice sin no more. You see, it was connected, that mercy was connected to their sin. It's the same in a sense with us and our relationships. Yeah, we see the wrong done to us, but we still offer mercy. We have compassion. We still have compassion for one another. And back to that Jude verses, the Jude 23 and 24, mercy does not turn a blind eye to sin. It does not pretend it didn't happen. It happened. I was wronged, but I still offer mercy. You know, and here again, mentioning boundaries and stuff in relationships, it does not say that if that person continues to, in a sense, take advantage of that, to do that, we can have a boundary and still have mercy. Do you see what I'm saying? There's a boundary there. You're not going to continue to promise to meet me at Starbucks at 10 o'clock if it's the 20th time in a row and you haven't showed up. I'm not going to make those plans with you, okay? I'm not going to continue to do that. But my heart towards you is compassion and mercy. I love you. I do. And I hope you get this right. And I'm ready. I love you. This is my heart of mercy towards you. But I have boundaries. Okay? So for people that struggle with that, getting run over, I throw that in there. Okay? Because it's a necessary part of showing mercy. Mercy is not weakness. Okay? That's not the way it works. Jesus, when he showed mercy to the crowds, did he ever come across as weak? No way. No way. He goes, he heals, he treats, he has compassion, and then he says, stop doing that. Go and sin no more. That was mixed. That was the way he handled the situation. This is one safety valve for favoritism. Are you willing to offer this kind of mercy to those people that are a part of your clique? Well, do away with the clique and quit having that. Offer mercy to everyone. And offer mercy to them too. All shepherds, this is what you should expect from your shepherds. Do you realize this? Being a shepherd is a painful position if you do it right. Because, oh man, I feel for every single. It's like this should be the attitude of the shepherd. Oh, I feel, even when you've wronged me, I feel for you. I have compassion for you. I have mercy towards you. That was the suffering Savior. Do you catch that? That was a part of who Jesus was. He had such compassion. Got him right in the gut that he longed to gather Israel. He longed to gather Jerusalem. Jerusalem, I've loved you. I've loved you. I've shown mercy, but you continue to hate me to the point of killing me, he says. But that is a message to all of us, but it is really a message to shepherds of an attitude towards the body, towards people. But our mercy is not dependent on someone receiving. If we warn somebody about sin, our mercy towards them is not dependent on them acting on that. So I continue to have mercy, even though you did not act on that sin that I brought to your attention. So you'll see this in shepherds. A painful, even passionate identification of sin without judgment. That's a hard thing to do. In fact, it's impossible balance to make, because it's not about balance. It's about being spirit-filled. You cannot do it unless you're spirit-filled. It doesn't happen in the world, that way of doing things in a general fashion. So, if you are a believer, you will face Jesus at the judgment seat of Christ. And if you have shown mercy, it will be very good for you at the judgment seat of Christ. If you have lived a life of mercy. If you've lived a life of criticism and judgment, I don't want to be in your shoes and receive the loss of reward that you're going to receive. But if you just live shown mercy towards those around you, it will go good for you. Even in this life, as I mentioned before, if we show mercy, it impacts. I might not be thinking about God, particularly if while I'm showing you mercy, but God is pleased. It affects His relationship with us. So, you may have picked up on this. I want us to understand how important it is to God that we have mercy on one another, on other people, and understand its eternal impact. It's the difference between you sharing the gospel and not. Sometimes, if you're not a gospel sharer, has nothing to do with your ability to communicate, has nothing to do with your knowledge of the gospel. It may have to do with your mercy. Is the reason you're not sharing the gospel with others, with the people you work with. You haven't shared the gospel with that person yet? You're right there with him. You have the opportunity to share truth. It could be because you don't have mercy or compassion for that person. A lot of times, because the gospel is shared with another person because you have to share it. You have to share it because of your empathy, your compassion, your mercy towards that person to save them from the flames of hell. That's dramatic, but that's kind of the way Jude puts it, right? At the same time, you're very careful to not let a bad attitude slip in, because you will be tainted by the sin then yourself. Hebrews 4:16. Micah, will you read that? Listen to this as we read this verse. I ask you this. Do you want mercy? You know, I ask God for mercy all the time. Do y'all do that? I realized when I read this, I do that all the time. I'm always asking God for mercy. God have mercy on me, you know. And I'm not asking Him because I deserve it. No, I know I don't deserve it. That's why I wouldn't need mercy. If I deserved it, it wouldn't be mercy. No, I'm asking mercy. I don't deserve it. I need mercy. God, give me mercy. Have I shown mercy? Have I shown mercy? God desires to give me mercy. But He desires me to show mercy too. Listen to this verse.
Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need.
Can you approach the throne boldly, with confidence, asking for mercy? Well, let me ask you this. How's your giving of mercy been? How's your attitude toward all others, not just a few? How's your attitude? How's your heart? Do you have mercy and compassion for everybody in this room? For everybody you work with? Do you have mercy towards them? Well, God desires to show you mercy. Maybe He's waiting on you to show you mercy. He's waiting on you, looking, as it were, over the edges of heaven, looking down and saying, "Come on, be merciful, be merciful." That's the main thing I want you to grow in. Be merciful. I am merciful. You be merciful, and I want to lavish you with mercy because it's who I am. It's just who I am, so I want to show mercy so I can do it. So, don't leave this behind. Don't take this as another little thing we studied and then put it in your notebook or wherever. Put it in the back of your head. Oh yeah, I learned about mercy today. I know the difference now between mercy and grace. I'm a good student of theology. I don't care about that. But I do care about how you live. I really, really care about that. And God cares about that. So, grow in mercy, give mercy, receive mercy from God. He wants to show it to you.